The smartphone resting on the mahogany kitchen island would not stop vibrating. By Monday afternoon, there were 62 missed calls. By Wednesday, the number had climbed to 89. By Friday morning, as the sun began to cast long golden rays through the kitchen windows, the total had reached exactly 147. Every single buzz that vibrated against the marble countertop sent a small, quiet wave of profound satisfaction through my chest. I sat there in my comfortable morning robe, a steaming mug of dark roast coffee in my hands, looking out at the meticulously manicured lawn of my suburban home, and watched from afar as my former company's entire digital infrastructure began to crumble. My wife, Helen Bradley, walked into the kitchen, wrapped her arms around my shoulders, and chuckled at the incessantly buzzing device. She knew exactly what was happening, and she fully supported the silent war I was waging. Just 5 days earlier, I had walked out of the glass-paneled doors of Horizon Systems with nothing but a small cardboard box of personal belongings and a calm, knowing smile that left everyone in the lobby utterly confused. My name is Martin Bradley. I am 55 years old, and for the past 8 years, I had been the absolute backbone of the technical operations at Horizon Systems. We provided critical enterprise software solutions to over 1,000 clients, ranging from municipal transit authorities to regional healthcare networks. For 8 years, I had quietly, diligently, and expertly held their fragile, aging back-end architecture together with custom automation scripts, midnight debugging sessions, and sheer willpower. I was the lead systems architect in title, but in practice, I was the sole guardian of their operational stability. I grew up in a blue-collar family where hard work was the only currency that mattered. That upbringing instilled in me a deep sense of integrity, a belief that you do the job right, you take care of the people who rely on you, and you expect your employer to recognize that dedication. But the corporate world does not operate on blue-collar logic. It operates on perception, visibility, and politics. My manager was a man named Jason Caldwell. Jason was the kind of executive who mistook a loud voice for leadership and a golf club membership for strategic vision. For 4 years, Jason had dangled the promotion to Principal Systems Architect in front of me like a carrot. Every annual review, he would praise my flawless execution, my incredible uptime metrics, and my unparalleled technical knowledge. Then he would tell me that the promotion was coming in the next quarter, or the next fiscal year, or after the next big product launch. I had designed a complete overhaul of our deployment pipeline, a project that would save the company over $450,000 annually. Jason loved the proposal. The executive board approved it. Jason shook my hand and told me the promotion was virtually guaranteed. Then there was Justin Pierce. Justin had joined the company 20 months ago. Objectively speaking, Justin was an incredibly average, mid-level developer. He wrote functional code, but he lacked any deep architectural understanding. If a server crashed, Justin would stare at the logs in complete bewilderment. But Justin had one singular talent. He was a master of corporate theater. He volunteered for every visible committee. He organized Friday happy hours. He played 18 holes of golf with Jason every single Saturday, and he never missed an opportunity to confidently use buzzwords in all-hands meetings. I never held Justin's sociability against him. Networking is a skill. What I deeply resented was the assumption by upper management that Justin's charm equated to technical capability. The turning point came on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning. Jason had called an emergency department meeting. I sat in the conference room, my notebook open, expecting the formal announcement of my promotion and the kickoff of the infrastructure overhaul I had spent months designing. Instead, Jason stood at the front of the room, beaming with unearned pride, and announced that the new principal systems architect would be Justin Pierce. The words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Justin looked momentarily surprised, then flashed a brilliant smile, stood up, and delivered a slick, practiced speech about synergy and forward momentum. I clapped politely. I kept my face entirely neutral. But, internally, the final thread of my loyalty to Horizon Systems snapped. After the meeting, Jason pulled me into his glass-walled office. He avoided making direct eye contact, staring instead at a spot just over my left shoulder. He told me that while my technical skills were phenomenal, the new role required strong soft skills, client-facing charisma, and the ability to interface with executive stakeholders. Justin, he claimed, had the right soft skills for the strategic vision, while the company desperately needed me to remain exactly where I was to handle the execution. In corporate translation, this meant Justin would take the credit and the massive salary increase, while I would continue doing all the actual heavy lifting for my current pay. I smiled, told Jason I completely understood, and walked back to my desk. I did not scream. I did not throw a tantrum. I simply sat down on my dual monitors and engaged in cold, hard calculation. I checked my finances. Helen and I had been frugal, our mortgage was nearly paid off, and we had enough savings to live comfortably for over 2 years without a single paycheck. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I was 55 years old, at the absolute peak of my technical prowess, and I refused to spend one more day building empires for men who treated me like a disposable utility. I was going to leave, and I was going to do it with surgical precision. Sitting at my workstation, I began to inventory exactly what made the Horizon Systems infrastructure function so smoothly. Over the past 8 years, I had written dozens of highly complex, incredibly efficient automation scripts. These scripts monitored server loads, caught database deadlocks before they cascaded into catastrophic failures, dynamically balanced traffic during peak usage hours, and automatically resolved synchronization errors in the middle of the night. None of these tools were part of my official job description. I had never been asked to build them. In fact, I had written every single line of that automation code at home, on my personal laptop, during my weekends and evenings. I had done it simply because I hated being paged at 3 in the morning for issues that a clever algorithm could fix instantly. This distinction was absolutely critical. Under federal copyright law, specifically Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, the creator of an original work fixed in a tangible medium of expression holds the exclusive rights to that work. Because I had written the code on my own time, using my own personal equipment and entirely outside the scope of my formal employment duties, Horizon Systems did not own those scripts. I owned the copyright. I was the sole legal proprietor of the intellectual property that was currently keeping their multi-million-dollar platform from collapsing under its own weight. Jason vaguely knew that I had automated some processes, but he had absolutely no comprehension of the scale or the legal ownership of the code. For 3 hours, I worked methodically and silently. I did not delete anything. Deleting company property would be sabotage, and I am a professional. Instead, I simply logged into the servers and systematically disabled every single one of my proprietary scripts. I changed the execution schedule so they would no longer run. I reverted the load balancers back to their factory default configurations, exactly how they had been before I optimized them. I removed the dynamic scaling triggers. I took the entire fragile infrastructure back to the exact state it was in before I had spent years quietly bulletproofing it. It was completely functional, but it possessed absolutely zero safety margins. The moment a traffic spike hit, or a database query hung for too long, the system would buckle and there would be no invisible safety net to catch it. They would have to rely on Justin Pierce's soft skills to fix hard server crashes. Once the safety nets were completely disarmed, I drafted a crisp, formal resignation letter. It was 2 paragraphs long. I stated that I was resigning my position effective immediately, and in accordance with my employment contract, I was voluntarily forfeiting my final 2 weeks of salary in lieu of providing standard notice. I printed the document, signed it with a heavy black pen, and walked straight into Jason's office. He was on a conference call, leaning back in his expensive ergonomic chair, twirling a golf tee between his fingers. I placed the letter precisely in the center of his desk. He glanced down, and within 3 seconds, his entire demeanor shattered. He hastily muted his call and stared at me with wide, panicked eyes. He demanded to know what was going on, asking if this was about the promotion. He desperately offered to discuss a title bump, maybe a minor salary increase, pleading with me to be reasonable and provide at least a standard transition period. I kept my voice perfectly even, devoid of any emotion. I informed him that my decision was final, that my personal belongings were already packed, and that I would be vacating the premises within 15 minutes. When he tried to invoke company loyalty and the upcoming massive deployment project, I politely reminded him that he had just promoted a highly capable principal systems architect who was undoubtedly equipped to handle the strategic execution of all technical operations. The absolute silence that followed that statement was the most beautiful sound I had heard in 8 years. I walked out of Jason's office, picked up my small cardboard box, and headed for the elevator. A few junior developers looked up, confusion painted across their faces. I offered them a polite wave and wished them the best of luck. Justin was nowhere to be seen, likely busy networking in the cafeteria. As the elevator doors slid shut, separating me from the fluorescent lights of a company that had consistently undervalued my worth, I felt an overwhelming sense of profound liberation. I drove home, poured myself a glass of iced tea, sat on my back patio with Helen, and simply listened to the birds sing. It was a beautiful Tuesday afternoon, and for the first time in nearly a decade, I was entirely free from the crushing weight of unappreciated responsibility. But I knew the storm was coming. The infrastructure I had left behind was a ticking time bomb of technical debt and manual inefficiencies. Horizon Systems served municipal networks and massive logistics companies. They required absolute flawless uptime. Without my proprietary automation scripts holding the fragile architecture together, it was only a matter of time before a standard minor anomaly escalated into a catastrophic failure. I had left the company entirely legally, adhering to every clause in my contract, but I had taken my intellectual property with me. Now, they were going to have to navigate the turbulent waters of enterprise software management, relying entirely on the charm and charisma of a man who could not write a functional database query to save his own life. The first wave of panic hit the very next morning. At exactly 8:15 on Wednesday, my phone buzzed with a call from Jason. I let it ring out. A voicemail immediately followed. His tone was tight, attempting to sound casual but failing miserably. He asked if I could spare 10 minutes for a quick chat about some legacy configurations that Justin was having trouble locating. I deleted the message. By noon, Jason had called 4 more times. In the afternoon, Sarah Jenkins, the director of human resources, attempted to reach me twice, leaving formal voicemails requesting an emergency exit interview to discuss critical knowledge transfer. Knowledge transfer is corporate terminology for extracting the expertise they refused to pay for while you were still an employee. I ignored her completely. On Thursday, the situation clearly escalated from mild confusion to severe operational distress. My phone screen lit up with numbers I did not recognize, likely engineers calling from their personal devices because I had blocked the main corporate lines. Edward Montgomery, the chief technology officer, called me personally. Edward was a man who operated entirely in the stratosphere of the C-suite. In 8 years, he had spoken to me exactly 3 times, mostly to take credit for the flawless uptime reports I had generated. Now he was leaving urgent voicemails demanding a callback to discuss a lucrative consulting arrangement. Jason left another message, his voice trembling slightly, explicitly offering me $350 an hour just to log in remotely and diagnose a database replication error that was stalling their entire workflow. I was previously making $75 an hour. It was incredibly validating to see my market value suddenly multiply by nearly 5 the moment my absence was felt. While Horizon Systems was busy panicking, I was proactively securing my future. I spent Thursday morning polishing my resume, highlighting the massive efficiency gains and uptime records I had achieved. I reached out to a trusted executive recruiter, Rachel Gibson. Rachel had been trying to poach me for nearly 2 years. Within 3 hours of sending her my updated portfolio, she called me with tremendous enthusiasm. She had secured an expedited interview for Friday morning at Pinnacle Dynamics, a direct and highly respected competitor to Horizon Systems. Pinnacle was known in the industry for treating their senior engineering talent like absolute royalty. They valued deep technical expertise over political maneuvering. By Friday morning, the situation at my former employer had devolved into complete catastrophe. I woke up, brewed my coffee, and sat at the kitchen island with Helen to review the notifications. There were now 147 missed calls. I opened my professional network feed and saw the quiet chaos unfolding in real time. 24 major enterprise clients of Horizon Systems were experiencing severe, prolonged service outages. The automated recovery systems were not triggering because they were disabled. The database deadlocks were stacking up, paralyzing the customer relationship management portals for hospitals and transit authorities. Justin Pierce, the golden boy with the impeccable soft skills, was entirely incapable of diagnosing the root cause. He could smile at stakeholders, but he could not untangle a corrupted data matrix. Friday afternoon, Edward Montgomery called again, and this time I decided to answer. His voice was incredibly strained. Stripped of all its usual corporate bravado, he bypassed all pleasantries and launched straight into a desperate negotiation. He admitted that they were facing catastrophic breaches of their service-level agreements. He offered me the principal systems architect position immediately, completely bypassing Jason's authority. Furthermore, he offered a massive 40% salary increase and a substantial signing bonus if I would simply return and stabilize the platform. Justin, he casually mentioned, would be quietly transitioned into a non-technical project management role where his communication skills would be more appropriate. It was the exact promotion and recognition I'd been demanding for 4 years, handed to me on a silver platter born of absolute desperation. But I remembered a conversation I had with my grandfather many decades ago. He told me that there is a massive fundamental difference between being needed and being valued. An employer who only offers you a seat at the table when their house is burning down does not value your expertise. They simply need a firefighter to extinguish the flames so they can return to ignoring you. I calmly told Edward that I appreciated the extremely generous offer, but I was pursuing other opportunities and had no intention of returning to Horizon Systems under any circumstances. Edward's desperation quickly morphed into frustration, and he made a fatal tactical error. He coldly informed me that they did not actually need me to return. They simply needed me to hand over the administrative passwords to the proprietary automation directory I had locked down so their engineering team could reactivate the scripts. He claimed the code belonged to the company and hinted at legal action if I withheld critical infrastructure components. I smiled, feeling the adrenaline of absolute certainty wash over me. I informed him that the code in question was developed entirely on my personal time, using my personal equipment, and was absolutely not considered work for hire. I wished him the best of luck resolving his outages and terminated the call, leaving him staring into the abyss of his own monumental mismanagement. The weekend brought the inevitable escalation. Horizon Systems, bleeding revenue and facing massive penalties from furious clients, decided to try and take what they could not buy. On Saturday morning, I received an alert from a dormant monitoring daemon I had installed on my personal server. Someone from the Horizon Systems network was actively attempting to force their way into the encrypted cloud repository, where I stored the backup iterations of my automation scripts. Jason and Justin were desperately trying to bypass the security protocols to copy my intellectual property and deploy it to save their failing systems. They believed that corporate necessity gave them the right to simply seize my personal work without permission. They were about to learn a very expensive, highly public lesson in federal intellectual property law and the consequences of their arrogance. I immediately contacted a highly aggressive intellectual property attorney named Marcus. I provided him with the time-stamped logs proving that I had developed the scripts at home, the Git commit history linked to my personal hardware, and the server logs showing Horizon Systems attempting unauthorized access. Marcus drafted a brutal, airtight cease and desist letter. He explicitly cited Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, which grants the copyright owner the exclusive rights to reproduce, distribute, and display the copyrighted work. The letter formally notified Edward Montgomery and the Horizon Systems legal department that the automation scripts were the sole intellectual property of Martin Bradley. Any unauthorized access, copying, or deployment of those scripts constituted willful federal copyright infringement, carrying statutory damages of up to $150,000 per infringement. Marcus served the letter electronically to Horizon's general counsel on Monday morning. Right as I was walking into the sleek, modern lobby of Pinnacle Dynamics for my in-person interview, as I shook hands with Rachel Gibson and the Director of Engineering, Daniel Cho, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew exactly what it was. Horizon's legal team had undoubtedly reviewed the cease and desist, looked at my airtight documentation, and informed Edward and Jason that they were entirely out of bounds. Under the strict provisions of Section 106, they had absolutely zero legal right to use my code without a formal licensing agreement. They could not steal it. They could not copy it, and they certainly could not use it to fix their burning servers. My interview at Pinnacle Dynamics was a revelation. Daniel Cho did not ask me about my golf handicap or my ability to synergize with stakeholders. He asked me brutal, highly complex questions about distributed systems architecture, latency optimization, and disaster recovery protocols. We spent 2 hours deep in the technical weeds, drawing architecture diagrams on a massive whiteboard. They respected my expertise. They valued my 8 years of battle-tested experience. When the interview concluded, Rachel Gibson pulled me into a private office and did not hesitate. She handed me an offer letter on the spot. Pinnacle Dynamics offered me the title of Senior Principal Architect. The compensation package was staggering. A base salary of $265,000, substantial performance bonuses, and a massive equity grant. It was nearly 3 times what I had been making at Horizon. I signed the offer letter right then and there, feeling a profound sense of vindication. When I returned to my car, I checked my emails. There was an urgent message from Horizon's general counsel copying Edward Montgomery. The tone had shifted from aggressive demands to complete capitulation. They acknowledged my copyright under the law. However, they were completely incapable of stabilizing their platform without my code. They requested a formal short-term licensing agreement to use my scripts while they transitioned to a new architecture. I called Marcus, and we drafted the terms. I agreed to grant Horizon Systems a strict, non-exclusive, 6-month license to utilize my copyrighted automation scripts. The cost for this temporary license was a non-negotiable, one-time payment of $120,000, payable immediately by wire transfer. Horizon Systems had no leverage, no technical capability to rebuild the tools quickly, and clients who were threatening to terminate multi-million-dollar contracts. They signed the licensing agreement on Tuesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, the $120,000 was sitting securely in my retirement account. I had successfully weaponized federal law to not only protect my intellectual property, but to force the company that had undervalued me to pay a massive premium for the privilege of temporarily surviving without me. Jason Caldwell's decision to promote a charming amateur over a seasoned veteran had cost his company immense reputational damage, furious clients, and a massive, unbudgeted licensing fee. It was the most perfect, legally pristine revenge I could have ever orchestrated, executed flawlessly and entirely above board. My integration into Pinnacle Dynamics was entirely seamless. The corporate culture was completely foreign to what I had endured for 8 years. At Pinnacle, engineering talent was treated as the core engine of the company, not a necessary expense to be minimized. When I requested advanced diagnostic software, it was approved in 10 minutes. When I proposed a radical restructuring of our data processing pipeline, Daniel Cho assigned a team of 4 brilliant junior developers to help me build the prototype. I was respected, I was supported, and most importantly, I was challenged. I found myself waking up every morning genuinely excited to tackle complex engineering problems, devoid of the toxic, draining politics that had slowly crushed my spirit at my previous job. The sheer level of professional courtesy I experienced was almost overwhelming at first, but I quickly adapted to an environment where logic and competence were actually rewarded over mindless posturing and glad-handing. Within 6 months, my contributions to the stability and efficiency of the Pinnacle platform were undeniable. I had successfully implemented the pipeline upgrade, reducing our cloud computing costs dramatically while simultaneously improving response times across the board. The executive leadership recognized the impact immediately. I was called into a meeting with the Chief Executive Officer and Daniel Cho. They did not dangle promises of future rewards or string me along with vague timelines. They formally promoted me to Director of Platform Reliability, expanding my team to 12 engineers and further increasing my compensation package. I was 56 years old, and my career was accelerating faster than it ever had in my 30s. Helen and I celebrated with a 2-week vacation to Tuscany, entirely unplugged from the digital world, enjoying the absolute peace of mind that comes from knowing you are valued. Through the tight-knit industry grapevine, I occasionally heard updates regarding the ongoing fallout at Horizon Systems. The transition period had been utterly brutal for them. Despite paying the massive licensing fee to use my scripts, they lacked the fundamental architectural understanding to properly maintain or adapt them as their client needs evolved. They suffered immense client churn, losing 3 of their largest municipal contracts to competitors. The board of directors demanded accountability for the disastrous outages and the financial losses. Edward Montgomery desperately needed a scapegoat, and Jason Caldwell was the most convenient target. Jason was quietly stripped of his managerial authority and reassigned to a dead-end internal operations role, safely isolated from any critical infrastructure decisions. He lost his prestigious corner office and was relegated to a cubicle in the basement levels. As for Justin Pierce, his renowned soft skills ultimately could not mask his technical incompetence when the servers were actually on fire. The engineering team completely lost faith in his leadership within weeks of my departure. Recognizing that he was entirely out of his depth, Justin voluntarily requested a transfer out of the engineering department. He landed a position in technical sales, a role where his ability to network, play golf, and speak confidently using buzzwords was actually a legitimate asset. I harbored no ill will towards Justin. He was simply a man playing the corporate game. The true failure belonged to a management structure that prioritized performance over substance. Looking back, the day Jason passed me over for that promotion was unequivocally the greatest professional blessing I have ever received. If he had given me the title, I would have spent the next 10 years working 80-hour weeks, holding their fragile systems together, stressed, exhausted, and vastly underpaid. Their betrayal shattered my complacency. It forced me to recognize the immense value of my own expertise and to understand that loyalty is a transaction that must be mutually beneficial. I had given them 8 years of absolute dedication, and they had responded with disrespect. So, I took my dedication, my expertise, and my federally protected intellectual property, and I walked out the door. I still have a screenshot of my phone's call log from that chaotic Friday morning, proudly displaying the 147 missed calls. I keep it in a secure folder on my laptop, not out of bitterness, but as a silent, powerful reminder of my own worth. When a company takes your quiet competence for granted, they assume you will simply absorb the indignity and continue doing the heavy lifting. They never expect the quiet professional to fully understand their legal rights, pack up their desk, and calmly remove the invisible pillars holding the entire operation together. Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, proved to be a far more effective weapon than any angry email or dramatic exit speech could have ever been. It was the ultimate shield against corporate exploitation. To anyone out there who is quietly keeping the lights on, while others take the credit, to anyone who has been told they lack the specific political traits required for advancement, despite doing the work of 3 people, hear this clearly. Do not let management dictate your value. Document your achievements. Understand the legal boundaries of your intellectual property. And never be afraid to step away from a table where respect is no longer being served. Your competence is incredibly valuable, and there is a massive market of companies desperate for genuine expertise. If you found value in this story of legally mandated karma and professional self-respect, hit that subscribe button. We are building a community that values hard work over smooth talk. Know your worth, secure your future, and never answer the phone when they call to ask for the expertise they refuse to compensate.